Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Well, my friends, for those of you who've been listening intently to what's happening here in the great state of Indiana, today appears to be the day when the Indiana State Senate will be voting on whether or not they will approve the new maps or not. If you've been sitting on the fence waiting, if you've been busy, I get it. I get it. If you're a Hoosier, I understand that there are a lot of things vying for your attention, a lot of things happening, going on that could prevent you from making your voice known, but this is it. It has to be done. In fact, if you're listening to my voice after Thursday, I know folks listen at different times depending upon whether they listen to the Toddcast or whatever, but this, you may not be able to make your voice known. But if you hear this and it's still Thursday, make it known that you want to see these new maps approved for the reasons that we've discussed on this program for the past couple of weeks now, my friends. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk a little bit, use this to talk about the difference between, there's a lot of teachable moments here. This is a real-time civics lesson for people, which I think is good. For those who think we live in a pure democracy, for those who think that there's something sacred about the lines where they're drawn today, for people who think that there's some sort of objective fairness and set of unspoken accepted rules to this process, all of those things people are learning in real time, and I think it's good. I don't know what's going to happen here. This is going to be potentially a razor-thin vote in the Indiana State Senate today, and I got some words and thoughts about that as well. That's the direction we're headed, my friends, talking a little bit about rhinos versus conservatives and the battle that's happening for both the Republican Party, control of the Republican Party, which is a battle between the moderates, the rhinos. That's kind of a group I've just lumped together. The rhinos and moderates versus the conservatives. And then, of course, the Democrat Party is a fight between the liberals and the reasonable Democrats fighting against the radically insane leftists out there that have taken over a big chunk of the Democrat Party. And all of this fuels the larger fight, which is the battle for America. Is this country going to be what she was founded to be, or are we on the way? I know we're on the path, but are we literally on the doorstep of becoming something we were never intended to be? A state or a nation that no longer reflects liberty, a nation that has top-down rule from Washington, D.C. We've already seen this in a lot of ways, but can we still fight back against this? Do we still have states' rights? Do we still have a nation where federalism matters and individual liberty matters? We do, but my friends, that has been under assault for a long time, and we're feeling the pinch here. So that's the direction we're headed today, my friends. I'm glad that you joined us. You know, one of the biggest challenges that we as conservatives have is finding ways to ensure our values align with the way that we live our lives, everything that we do. And I know that we don't want to make everything political, but listen, it matters. If you go to a local establishment and do business with them, and then they use those profits to help fund the causes that you are completely opposed to, diametrically opposed to, that's a problem. That's a major problem. And so I think we've been awakened to this over the past, many X number of years. But it's also important in the way that we invest our money. That's why I love what the team at 8 Financial is doing. They specialize in biblically responsible investing. That means they screen out companies that don't align with Christian faith, Christian values, so that we're not funding things that go against the very things that we believe in. They do all the heavy lifting. All you have to do is complete a short assessment. And you can do that by going to 48financial.com/Todd. It's short. It's easy. I did it. You can too. 48financial.com/Todd. 48 Financial, because your money should work for your values, my friends. All right, so let's give just kind of a general update here, since we've been talking about this for the past couple of weeks. The Indiana State Senate is scheduled to vote today on the final redistricting bill, the final maps, the proposed new maps for congressional districts. Indiana's breakdown in the state Senate is as follows. There are 50 senators in our state Senate. Now, again, if you're not in Indiana, this stuff still applies because of the national implications. That's why we've been talking about it so much on this program. I've done everything I know to do here, my friends. I don't know how this is going to shake out. But this is critically important that we get these victories, and I'm going to kind of break down why. So Indiana has 50 senators, 40 of them, 80% are Republican. 10 of those senators in the Indiana State House are Democrats. Of those 40 Democrats, so you have to have 25. If it's a 25-25 vote, Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith will cast that tie-breaking vote, and we all know what he's prepared to do. We know from, he talked about it here on this program, a couple of weeks ago, a month ago. And so we know that. We've also heard him be very outspoken about this and his support, just like I have been. So you need 25 Republican senators to get this done. That's 25 out of 40, which is, what is that, 62% of Republicans? Is that what it is? It's 5/8. That should be 62.5% if memory serves me correct. But nonetheless, that's what has to happen. But there have been a significant number of Republicans who have said that they are opposed to this or who are undecided on this, even at this late hour. So it's going to be razor thin. I think that the number of senators who've been on the record saying they're going to support this is around 14, 15, 16 that I'm aware of. That, reporting on a state issue like this is not nearly as easy to find information as you would see coming from something in Washington, D.C., for example. But somewhere around that. So there needs to be another 10, roughly, 9, 10, 11 Republicans sign on to this. And there's certainly a group that could still be swayed. One of the things I read this morning said that the Senate Majority Whip, which this is the individual who is responsible for getting Republicans to, vote along the leadership's position. Now, of course, we know the leadership in the Senate here in our state that does not want this to happen. Rod Bray does not want redistricting for reasons that we don't know, because he doesn't care to tell us that. He thinks that he'll keep that to himself as he's out there doing GQ photos for Politico and short articles, again, telling us nothing. But anyway, the bottom line here is that it's going to be a close vote here. Although I've mentioned Rod Bray, there's reasons to think that there's disagreement amongst the leadership in the Senate, so there could be some in positions of leadership, certainly, that are going to vote in favor of this. Anyway, we'll see how this all shakes out, and it's why, if you're listening to my voice and it's still Thursday, you can still send your emails, you can still make your phone calls, and of course, respectfully, let them know what you hope that they do. So it raises the question, though, how can we get to this point? And for those of you, and I know that there's some of you in this audience, I've come out pretty strongly in favor of this. And there's some of you that still, in spite of all of my reasons and rationale, aren't comfortable. And listen, I've shared on here candidly that I would say 10 years ago, I don't know what I would have thought about this. I might have not been in favor of this 10 years ago. Knowing what I even knew then, it's funny to me. It's funny, since Trump came to the national scene, I've been following this since politics in general, probably since, I don't know, the early to mid 90s when I was in high school, definitely in college. That's when I was a political science major and having those arguments. That started back in, I guess, 1996. Although I was quiet at Butler, not so quiet at American University. But nonetheless, I've been following this for quite some time, at least 30 years, probably more like 35 years. But I've learned along the way. I remember, and I've shared with you during the time of this program, from the beginning of this program 10 years ago until today, I've shared with you on some occasions just the process of what it was like for me to learn and me to understand what it meant, what's really at stake, and what some people are prepared and willing to do. And I remember distinctly, being on the horse farm. I can still in my head see where I was. It's funny. We're all programmed differently, but I'm such I learn audibly. It helps visually in some instances as well, but we're all different. But I can remember when I used to listen to Rush's podcast when I would go for a jog or whatever at the park. If I listened to the podcast again or heard it somewhere else, a clip, it would immediately take me back to the place I was when I heard it on the trail at the park, say, for example. And that's, I can remember where I was on the farm when I heard, when I was wrestling with some of the things Rush was saying, which was, there are people that hate America as founded. That did not compute for me as a young 20-something-year-old kid. It didn't register in my brain. I couldn't understand it. How could you hate this country? It was perplexing to me. How could you not, by looking over the course of history, see the beauty of this great nation and what the principles that she was founded upon? Absolutely, the founders were completely wrong. Not all of them, because some of them opposed it. But with what happened in regards to slavery and so forth, that was reprehensible. But there are so many other things that are good, and candidly, the foundation to treat all people equally was baked into this country so that we could eventually eradicate the evil of slavery from this great nation. And I remember thinking, surely people don't hate it, as Rush is explaining, but I came to realize he was right. He was right. And they hate this nation as founded. They hate this nation being built upon liberty. I don't think we truly and completely understand just how much people who are on the side of big government, people who are tyrants, how much they hate liberty, how much they hate you having the choice to to run your own life, to make your own choices. I don't think we fully grasp just how evil that is in their sight. Of course, it's not evil. That's just how they look at it. The arrogance required for someone to be of the belief that they have all the answers and that they should be able to institute a top-down approach in our nation's capital, and that everyone else just blindly follow because they're so much smarter and superior to the rest of us hayseed hicks, is laughable to me. But there are people who really and truly believe that, and that is part of what is at stake here. This issue, this redistricting fight, which again is happening in other states around the country as well, and which, by the way, you will not hear me complaining and crying that it's unfair if another blue state does something like this to try to gain more seats. I will, however, point out when there's actual gerrymandering, which is when districts are clearly distorted and drawn into really odd shapes so as to make sure that certain districts have a certain outcome. Indiana's not done that. They've not done that. The lines, by and large, include entire counties, but they certainly have split up counties. Well, one in particular, Marion County. And that's the prerogative of the legislature. If you don't like it, you can vote out the people who supported it. But for those who are still on the fence here, and they're not on board with this. It is a political thing. This isn't, a lot of what is in the American body politic today, a lot of this discourse, a lot of these debates, they are about things that it's good versus evil a lot of times today. And I don't like to say that unless it's true. I mean, we've reached the point where, literally we have people pushing an agenda that tries to deny science and basic human truths, that try to steal legally from one group of people to give to another. They promote godless, just wicked human depravity in some cases, pushing us away from liberty, away from free markets, towards big government, towards socialism, towards, dare I say, communism, statism. The state is God in the minds of these godless radical leftists. We talk about these things regularly. And there's a lot of instances where politics isn't even really politics anymore. It is a foundational fight and argument over what is good and what is evil. This is not that. This is a political fight. I will say this, though. That if these maps are not passed, the result will allow us, or allow the left, to have a tool at their disposal that allows them to further push ahead their evil and wicked agenda. That's what is true here. So why haven't Republicans here in this state in particular, why have they not used their political power here? What has caused them to not want to govern or legislate as conservative? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all these folks are not conservative. As I mentioned earlier, there's a fight, a battle for control of the Republican Party. And Indiana, though very, very red in many, many ways, within the Republican Party, there's a lot of rhinos, or a lot of moderates, a lot of country club Republicans that don't really see the urgency. I think, the closer to the middle you are, the less of a problem you have with people on the Democrat side of the aisle with the ideas, that they're proposing and standing by and so forth. And I don't think that they see the risk. I think that they think this is embarrassing. Why are we having this fight? This isn't stately, all those sorts of things. But Rhino, which stands for, it's RINO. I was telling someone this the other day. Younger people may not know these terms. Some of them in many ways know much, much more than we did when we were their age because of the information age that we live in. But others have, certainly don't know some of these terms. But RINO, RINO, stands for Republican in name only. And there are many rhinos in the state of Indiana. We had a rhino governor named Eric Holcomb. We have a rhino senator named Todd Young, a U.S. senator from the state of Indiana. We have other rhinos in the state of Indiana. And again, I don't want to be at just complete odds with them. But we as conservatives had better get control of the Republican Party, or we're going to have more of this weak, mamby-pamby sort of moderate approach. And it doesn't undo the mess that we find ourselves in. We need, conservatives who not only stop the insanity. It's not just enough to stop it and to put a pause on it. We actually have to undo it. Right? It's not enough to say, wow, this is a lot. Let's put the brakes on, put it in park. And then in 4 years, the Democrats win, or at some point they win, and they just put the car back in drive. They've started right where they stopped. They don't ever lose the ground. We're constantly losing ground. And a lot of it's because of these rhinos, or sometimes they're conservative people who just don't have the fight in them. And I have come to realize that and accept that That's why when you make those calls, it's not necessarily helpful to be confrontational. Just make sure that they know what you expect them to do, not in a threatening way, but in a way that they can feel like they've got the people behind them, because they're going to tick someone off here with these votes later today. And again, if they think that this is going away, if they think that Trump is not serious with the primary process or the heritage or whoever else, turning point action, this is going to become an area where Republicans are going to be challenging some of these folks. And to that, I say good. But for those who are still unconvinced about this, I have a couple of questions. Number one, why do we assume that the maps that we have now are right and that any deviation from that is wrong? Just explain that thinking to me. Because if these maps that are being proposed now, if they were drawn immediately in the wake of the 2020 census, would they have been acceptable, or would they have been unacceptable then as well? Why do we pretend like the Democrats who go to Washington, D.C. are not contributing to the problems that we face as Hoosiers? Why do we refuse to accept that? Why do we think it's great to make sure that we go out of our way to give them a seat that they have an advantage in? Why? When they are by definition creating these problems that I've talked about, creating these, again, not just minor differences of opinion, but radical, transformational, foundational differences of opinion that impact this state and this country in dramatic ways. I'm going to have to take a break here in a moment, my friends. We're talking here about the vote in the Indiana State House, the Indiana Senate specifically. That is slated to happen here today, it looks like. And we're going to see if we're going to have these new maps or we are not. I'm just going through that process, just making my last-minute appeals and also updates as to what's going on here in this process, because it impacts both Hoosiers and people all across this country. 100% absolutely. So, friends, if you're tired of spending hard-earned money at businesses that turn around and support leftist causes, check out Freedom Marketplace. It's a free searchable directory of businesses that share your conservative values, businesses that have vowed not to support leftist candidates, leftist causes. All you have to do is head on over to freedommarketplace.net. You'll find some good patriotic businesses pushing in the same direction you are. Check it out today, freedommarketplace.net. That's freedommarketplace.net. Liberty and business for all, my friends. Sit tight. You're listening here to Conservative Not Bitter Talk. I'm your host, Todd Huff. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Program brought to you in part by our friends at Christopher's Organic Botanicals, my friends. Listen, you're curious. If you are curious about kratom or just want honest answers before you try anything, which that's a great place to start. That's a great approach to this process. You're invited to the weekly tea talk from Christopher's Organic Botanicals. It happens every Thursday. That's today, my friends. Every Thursday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. No pressure, no sales pitch, just real conversations with real people who want to help you understand kratom, what it is, how it's used, all of those sorts of things, what to avoid, the truth about the negative things you've heard in the news and so forth. Christopher's Organic Botanicals believes education should come first. That's what sets them apart from a lot of these other folks that just want to push product and sometimes compromise your safety by putting out something that's synthetic, not natural, and just truly not even kratom. So if you have questions about relief, dosage, safety, sourcing, all those things, this is the place to ask those questions. They've built a community that's focused on truth, not hype. Again, that conversation happens every Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern. For more information, visit Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. That's Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Truth, tradition, and transparency, my friends. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about rhinos. And I mentioned that the rhinos means Republican in name only. A red state does not mean conservative leadership. And Indiana's political structure may create a lot of Republicans, but there's not a lot of conservative governance and legislation. Now, it's still vastly superior to what we see in other states that are run by leftists or even liberals, people on the left. But this is a far cry. What we have here in this state is a far cry from true conservatism. It really is. And I'm not. There certainly are people in the House or Senate who are conservative, but there's not enough of them. There's not enough of them. So much of what we're dealing with today is beyond politics. It truly is. It's beyond politics. And rhinos by nature, I ran into, what's his name? He's got Abdul. I can't think of his first name. Do you know who I'm talking about, Oz? I talked to him at the State House the other day. We had never met before. I said, "Are you Abdul?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Abdul, I'm Todd Huff. Good to meet you." And he made some comment. Some derogatory comment about Turning Point. He said something to the effect of, "I'm just here." I said, I may have asked him, what brings you here today? What do you here to talk? I don't know. You here to talk? You just seeing what's going on? What's happening? He said some comment about what this event allegedly was. And I said, "Really?" I said, "You don't think it is what it says?" "No, he doesn't like Turning Point." And I said, "Oh, well," I said, "I do, and I'm going to speak here in a bit." And I said, I told him what I did, and he said, "Well, I'm a rhino." And I said, "Well, I'm a conservative." And he basically said, "I tell people, though, that rhinos charge at you," or I don't know, some such thing. And I thought, rhinos don't do that, Abdul. Rhinos run for the hills. Rhinos won't answer my questions when I call as a constituent to ask for Rod Bray to give me his opinion. I just want their opinion. I'm not going to jump anybody. I might ask hard questions. I might push back a little. I might tell them that this is not what I voted for, and that I might even tell them that this is something that, to me, is a line in the sand, that if people are not prepared to cast this vote for the new ballots, then I don't think I can continue supporting a particular Republican. And I think that's why they don't want to have the conversation. Look, you can disagree with my reasons and rationale, but my goodness, over the past 2 weeks, during the speech that I gave at the State House, I have written a lot about this. I have poured everything I've got into this, my friends. And you can disagree with my reasons and rationale, but I'm telling you, I have still not heard from the rhinos. The rhinos that Abdul told me were charging just fierce components of our nature, just out there fighting for truth and standing firm and charging all over the place. I see the rhinos running for the hills. That's what I see. I see the rhinos afraid to ask or to answer questions, to make their opinions known. Why do we still not know where these folks are on their vote? I mean, if you can't decide where you are, it's just beyond my way of thinking here. I shared with you years ago, I don't do this often. We're doing this a little bit more now as the program has evolved, and as we're doing some other things that I'll tell you about as time progresses here. But I invited Senator Todd Young on the program to talk about, I've shared this on here before, to talk about the fight. I think it was over Brett Kavanaugh, or maybe it may have been Neil Gorsuch, now that I say this. It was one of the Supreme Court nominees, and someone from his office, I've got the email somewhere, basically said, "Oh, he'd love to come on the program once this issue's decided." And I said, "Well, I want to have him come on to try to persuade people that voting for Kavanaugh is the right move. I don't really want him to come on after the fact when it doesn't matter anymore, and then he can say whatever he wanted to say to be on the right political side of this." That's not leadership. For Abdul, the more I think about that, the The more he tells me rhinos are charging and leading the way, it's laughable. Listen, you don't have to be as conservative as me, but Rush used to say there's no book on great moderates in American history. It's true. These folks are not leading. They don't know what to do. They're terrified. They just want it to end. They've got their alarm clock set, their stopwatches. You're going to hear after the final vote today, you're probably going to hear alarms go off in all over the state house here, telling people, we got through that. Now that's metaphorical, but that's how they think. That's how they approach this. It's not leadership. It's beyond me. And there's going to be people, if we don't win this, that are going to heckle people and taunt people like me who've invested everything that I possibly could in persuading people to endorse this. And let me tell you, if we win, I'm not going to taunt anybody. I'm going to celebrate in the sense that I'm happy Indiana is going to have a better chance of sending more people with a brain and a backbone to Washington, D.C., but I'm not going to be taunting people. I guarantee you they will taunt me. And you know what? It says a lot more about them than it says about me. It reminds me of what was Teddy Roosevelt's that poem, the Man in the Arena, right? It's the people. It's not the critic who counts. It's the person who's out there with the blood, the sweat, who's trying to win the fight and at times may fail. But and I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen. I'm just saying that this is what we're up against, and it's infantile, it's juvenile. They think that they're leading when they're hiding, and they'll taunt and mock once the storm passes, but they didn't do anything themselves to actually move the needle. It's cowardly, and it's unacceptable, candidly, in my opinion. And that's what we have. That's what we have here when it comes to this issue of leadership, of principled governance, principled legislation. And this matters very, very much. It matters very, very much. And it's happening at a lot of places around the country. A lot of places are redistricting or talking about redistricting. If you've noticed, you don't hear a lot of news coming from the places that Democrats are doing this. In fact, Democrats are excused from doing this. In fact, even when they have to adjust, take extra steps because of their Constitution, what the Constitution requires, as in the state of California, for example, they had to have a referendum. I've had some people say, well, California showed us how to do this. They went to the people. Well, the reason California had to do it was because it was the referendum that they put forth required them to change the way that they normally were supposed to do it. Indiana didn't have to do any of that because this was always within the rules of the game. But weakness is a problem. Lack of principle is a problem. Ignorance is a problem. Comfort is a problem. Apathy is a problem. A lot of these folks are just sitting there collecting paychecks. They love to be politicians when they can kiss babies and shake hands and get invited to events to speak and have people say, oh, Mr. Senator, Mrs. Senator, thank you so much for doing this and making sure that you got funding for this or you stood up for that, all those sorts of things. They love that. But when the difficult decisions come, where are they? Where's Rod Bray? Where's the other senators leading here? They are hiding, my friends. It's pathetic. Whatever the outcome here is, this is still the truth. It's pathetic that this is how they approach this. I've never understood weakness. I've never understood cowardice. It's bizarre to me. It really is. Tell me what you think, stand by it, and live to fight another day if you lose. What is the big deal here? But, for some folks, image and appearance and politics is everything. I got to take a quick time out, though. You're listening here to Conservative, Not Bitter Talk. I'm your host, Todd Huff. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Ever wish you had a whole team to help manage your financial life? That's the beauty of family office services at Full Suite Wealth. Their experienced advisors bring together everything from high-level investment management, private equity, private credit, option strategies, to complex legal needs, all customized to you, all under one roof. It's like having a family office just for you, with people who know your story, know your goals. That's what Jason and his team provide to you at Full Suite Wealth. If you're serious about planning your long haul, your long-term financial life, your vision, your legacy, check them out. Visit fullsuitewealth.com. That's fullsuitewealth.com. Build your legacy, my friends. Secure your future. So what do I think is going to happen here? I truly don't know. I really don't know. I do know there's a couple things I'm very confident of. Number one, if this goes to a split 25-25 tie, this absolutely will pass because Micah, our Lieutenant Governor, Micah Beckwith, will absolutely vote for these new maps. But will we get there? Are there enough to get 25 of the 40 Republican state senators? I don't know. I'm a little bit on the concerned, pessimistic side, which is why I would say if you're hearing my voice and it's still Thursday and you've got a chance and this vote hasn't happened, to reach out to these senators to encourage them to pass these new maps. I've shared the story before, not the story, but my assessment of why people like Donald Trump so much. I know that there are people who hate Donald Trump. There are people who hate Donald Trump who are Republican state senators, and that's a big part of this as well. They just don't like Trump. Trump embarrasses them and everything else. But I would say, and listen, I understand you don't have to agree with everything Trump says, or certainly every encounter or interaction he has on social media and so forth. You can have questions. You don't have to agree with every single thing. But one thing that Trump has done and brought to politics that had not been in the Republican Party for a long time is the strength of resolve to do what he says he's going to do. I've said before, Donald Trump walked onto the political scene. Republicans had two problems. Number one, the people we elected weren't really as conservative as they told us they were, or they are conservative, but they're just wimps. And that was one thing we never had to worry about with Donald Trump. The guy is not a wimp. The guy will walk into any room, have a discussion with anybody, stand in front of a camera on 3 seconds notice, and answer any question that's thrown his way. It's remarkable. The contrast between that and what we got from Joseph Robinette bribery is unbelievable, really. They had this guy hidden as much as possible. And I don't blame them from the superficial sense. I understand what they were trying to do. They didn't want people to see just how incapable he was of running an administration, running this country. But they hid him. And when he did stand in front of the media, he had pictures of people to call on. He had the names and the order of which he was going to call on journalists, things like that. It's just sad and pathetic. And those are the sorts of things. I see a lot of that. See, that's protected. See, the media is willing to overlook all of that. They're not going to call you out for not doing press conferences. They're not going to get on you too much for having a list of, journalists that you're going to call on with their pictures, so you make sure you point to the right one. Probably because some of these people, it would not surprise me in the slightest if they had given him a pre-screened questions so that his team could give him the exact answer so he wouldn't have to use any sort of on-the-spot thinking whatsoever. And so, but the media will protect people like that if they toe the line for big government, if they toe the line for the narrative of the Democrat Party. And that's what's a shame to me and sad to me, is that that's what Senator Rod Bray and others, that's the approach they're taking. It's not transparent. It's not leadership. I think it's cowardice, regardless of where the vote is, just to duck the way that you've ducked. Why do you know? Ask yourselves this. Why in the world do you know more about what this talk show host thinks about this issue than you do certain senators? Why? I don't have a vote, and I can't even get the guy who has a vote representing me to acknowledge my existence, to respond to my concerns, my questions. Won't do it at all. But yet you know, and Indiana knows, and people in this audience know across this country more about what I think about this issue than most of the people in our state house. And why is that? It's inexcusable. Now, there's certainly some leaders and people who are not afraid to tell you, and I'm not throwing them into this bucket, but there certainly are people who don't like this moment. They didn't sign up for politics to do this. They signed up for politics to, get their name out there, to have maybe some sort of being honored at the local fair and shaking hands and kissing babies and all that sort of stuff. And it's unacceptable today. We're in the fight for the survival of this constitutional republic. Make no mistake about it. And let me be clear. The outcome of this vote later today in the Indiana Senate is going to impact potentially what happens in this nation after the 2026 midterms. And it could be ugly. It could involve lawfare. It will involve impeachments. It will involve all sorts of things that are not good for people that love this country and are Hoosiers with good values. Folks, I got to go, though, SDG.